On the 12th of January 1998, the legendary horror manga artist Junji Ito started working on a manga called Uzumaki. Uzumaki was a simple and short story that revolved around people's obsessions, their desires, and their morbid fascinations, all explored physically and metaphorically through the idea of spirals. But what made this piece of horror manga so compelling and powerful is how it took these concepts to their most extreme, destructive, and hopeless conclusions, all of which culminating into an incredibly disturbing but also beautiful, horrifying masterpiece that would captivate everyone who read it, and would even go on to be widely regarded as Junji Ito's greatest work ever. Unsurprisingly, the manga would soon go on to receive both a live-action adaptation and 2 visual novel things. But despite its immense popularity, Uzumaki wouldn't receive a proper anime adaptation for over 26 years. In fact, over the course of Junji Ito's 3-decade-long period working as a mangaka, he has made several iconic and nightmarish works that have been referenced everywhere from JJK to Chainsaw Man to Steven Universe to fucking SpongeBob, yet he has received exactly 0 good adaptations for any of them. Out of the 4 total anime adaptations that Junji Ito's works have received before 2024, all of them have a rating equal to or less than the fucking vending machine isekai. That's how stupidly low the bar has been set. The first ever attempt at adapting a Junji Ito work into an anime came from Ufotable of all studios. Gyo was an anime movie about a bunch of fish terrorizing and taking over the earth that came out in 2012, where for some unknown reason they made the fishes move around entirely in CGI, which for an anime made 12 years ago, I'm sure you can guess how well that turned out. Fast forward to 2018, and Studio D's nuts have decided to cash in on Junji Ito's name by making an anime straight up called Junji Ito Collection. But unlike Gyo, this anime actually looked kind of promising, and many people were quite excited over seeing some of their favorite Junji Ito works coming to anime form. And that's because this comedy anime featured a collection of Junji Ito short stories bundled together in a 12-episode series. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Did I say a comedy anime? No, I actually meant a horrible garbage anime that was a huge disappointment for everyone who was unfortunate enough to give it a shot. The only ones who were laughing as a result of this anime were the people who made a profit off of using Junji Ito's name in this show. If you're interested, you can go watch Super Eyepatch Wolf's video to learn more about this thing that happened for some reason. And as if even that wasn't enough, almost half a decade after the previously talked about failed attempt, Netflix decided to make a new Junji Ito adaptation called Junji Ito Tales of the Macabre. And well...
Yeah, Junji Ito, that anime, did you guys watch it?
I haven't. I've watched some of it.
Any episodes?
I've watched a few episodes, yes.
So I was just watching it, and I was like, holy shit, none of these are good. It's been years since I've watched an anime this bad. It is so dog shit.
Yeah, this just further proves this and the Junji Ito collection, which I sat through the entirety of, like solid evidence. You cannot adapt Junji Ito stuff.
Yeah, I think Junji Ito is unadaptable.
But what if there was a way to somehow adapt a Junji Ito work into an anime and actually make it work? Enter Akuno Hana. Akuno Hana was an anime that came out in 2013 and it absolutely sucked. Everyone hated how weird the show looked because of its groundbreaking revolutionary use of rotoscoping. A technique where you first film the entire scene in real life, then painstakingly draw over the entire footage to achieve this impossibly smooth looking animation, which actually can be made to look incredible when done right. But since the people working on the show obviously didn't have the insane amount of time to properly invest in animating over 4 hours worth of footage, Flower of Evil ended up with some really weird janky ass scenes that got memed into oblivion by both fans and critics alike. And when I say that this was not a well received anime, I mean it was somehow rated lower than both Redo of Healer and the and the fucking Inokai-san's dog anime. Having failed so miserably, the director of Flower of Evil, Hiroshi Nagahama, had probably learned his lesson not to half-ass such an ambitious project. And so when he was presented the opportunity to work on the anime adaptation of a little known manga called Uzumaki, he decided to once again go with rotoscoping as the main animation style, but this time he was going to properly take his time and really focus on the minute details of every single scene. And as if the idea of a fully rotoscoped anime wasn't challenging enough, the anime would also be made entirely in black and white, which at first seems like it would be easier to do given how they get to save up time on the coloring process. But a downside that not many people would consider is that without the obvious highlights and shadows you get from coloring a scene, showcasing depth becomes a challenge in itself.
本当になんか最低限の装備だけで戦いに挑むみたいな感じですかね。だからモノクロの方がすごくリスクが高いと思います。
These issues in the production, paired with the fact that they were often short-staffed, led to the anime being delayed a bunch of times and in the end taking a total of 5 years just to make 4 episodes worth of content. But you can see just how well that additional effort paid off in this adaptation, as it managed to take the still panels of the manga and bring them quite literally to life in the original black and white format. One of my favorite example of the anime using the rotoscoping to its advantage, aside from the sexy walk animation, is in this close-up shot of one of our main characters, Shuichi's dad, who is losing his fucking mind over the beauty of spirals. His descent into madness was handled fairly well by the manga, but the anime version just feels so much more real and upsetting because of how overly animated his expressions and movements are as he describes his obsession with spirals. The anime also understands that the original manga is very much a slow burn kind of horror where you're thrown into some eerie and unsettling place that creeps you out with every page you flip through. And the anime recreates that feeling precisely by never having quick jumpscare cuts with loud sounds to trigger your fight or flight instincts, but by making great use of the slow, swirling soundtrack made by Colin Stetson during scenes of abstract body horror. Everything about this adaptation has a mesmerizing effect to it in a way that no other Junji Ito adaptation has ever managed to replicate before. Which is why the moment Uzumaki's first episode dropped, everyone from anime fans to mainstream YouTubers to people who don't even watch anime were all praising this incredible adaptation. Not only was Uzumaki trending on Twitter for how great it was, but it even became the first Junji Ito anime ever to have a rating way higher than the vending machine isekai, which is personally the biggest metric of proof to show just how fantastic this adaptation really was. Now all that the Uzumaki anime needed was for Nagahama to keep doing things his own way, and we would have one of the most solid 4 episodes worth of Junji Ito stuff, and finally have a single great adaptation of his works that would literally go down in history. Which, I mean, of course it was going to be incredible all the way. They had spent 5 years, almost 2000 days to make this short 4 episode series. There's absolutely no way that they would find a way to fuck up this adaptation. Right? Oh, for fuck's sake. The second episode of Uzumaki is quite frankly unwatchable when compared to the first one. For some stupid reason, they decided to take everything that made the first episode so great and throw it out the window, including the director himself. The anime is no longer rotoscoped, or maybe it is, and they just couldn't be fucked to animate every scene with the same love and care as the first episode, which has made for some of the worst, most viral and laughably terrible animated scenes of anime in recent memory. The first episode of Uzumaki was by no means perfect. It did have its own flaws with pacing and structuring, but nothing that could overshadow the overall greatness of its gritty, lifelike, surreal, monotone visuals that made everyone uncomfortable because of how well all the elements clicked into place and immersed you into the horrifying reality of being sucked into a spiral lady. Whereas this second episode feels like you're watching a show wearing the skin of Uzumaki that doesn't really understand why people loved it in the first place, which results in scenes that honestly gross me out for all the unintended reasons. And it's like if they never planned on going through with rotoscoping for just 4 fucking episodes, then why even bother greenlighting the show to begin with? The weirdest part is they didn't just outsource this episode to some Chinese studio, they straight up gave it away to a hentai director. What the fuck is going on here? Did everyone in this production get cursed by the spiral? I can literally see the fucking unfinished background drawings on this already black and white anime. What the fuck is this running animation? What the hell were they doing for 5 fucking years? At first, when you hear that they spent a total of 5 years just to make 4 episodes worth of content, it really sounds like an impressive amount of dedication and effort had gone into the Uzumaki anime. But in reality, the majority of those 5 years were not spent on the production process at all. To begin with, Uzumaki was never a priority project for Toonami, who was producing like 7 different shows all at once in the middle of 2019, most of which they hadn't even announced yet, including this anime.
I've got 7 shows in production. So
What are the shows?
they're all anime, Blade Runner, and then 6 shows that haven't been announced.
This means that when the pandemic hit and everything in the world got put on hold, Uzumaki was the project for Toonami that took the biggest hit. Not only was Uzumaki left in a corner to collect dust for well over a year, it even came kind of close to getting cancelled at one point. But luckily that didn't happen, and the Uzumaki anime that was previously set to release in 2020 was simply moved forward to 2021, which does seem like a fairly reasonable amount of time for animating 4 total episodes given the soundtrack and screenplay had already been completed by now. Except we're forgetting something important here. They didn't just have to animate the show, they first needed to shoot an entire real-life short film with actors, camera crews and set designs, all of which required a level of maintenance and caretaking, which means additional time was needed in the actual animation process, which also means they needed additional budget to properly make a fully rotoscoped anime that didn't look as weird or janky as the ones that came before it. After going way over budget and taking way longer than initially anticipated, the director Nagahama was allegedly kicked off the project entirely by the higher-ups after episode 1 itself, and thus they went with a different director and studio altogether, resulting in, well, you know. Though the executive producer has come out with a statement saying how they were essentially screwed over by someone else and that there was definitely someone at fault here, I'm not sure if I'm ready to take these now deleted words at face value, especially given how other people have pointed out the irony of the statement. To be clear, it is highly likely that someone higher up in the chain of command has probably messed up somewhere along the line to cause this disaster. But at the moment, all we have is a deleted post by a producer of the show and not a word from the actual artist involved in the production, who probably had the worst time out of anyone else in this project. Except we possibly do have a statement from an actual artist involved in this disaster. So while researching for this video, I came across this tweet made by the so-called hentai director from episode 2 a few days after the episode had been released, detailing his experience working on a certain production he was involved in, where he wasn't given enough money or manpower to take his job seriously. He didn't specifically call out Uzumaki in this tweet, but a statement regarding a budgetary issue tracks fairly well with everything we have discussed so far. In other words, it was a severe lack of budget to keep up with the demands of their initial vision that led to them severely outsourcing the anime to different studios. But then they didn't even have enough money to get those other studios to give a shit about what they were making, which then led to more and more delays, to the point the anime ended up taking half a decade of production time on paper, when in reality it was never actively in production for a lot of those years. So there you have it. That's the reason why our insanely high expectations created by that inflated 5-year time period and a stellar first episode were crushed down instantly once they started running across the beach. Except it still doesn't actually answer why the anime looks so bad now. The production issues only explain why the anime got delayed a bunch, but they don't really explain why the first episode looked this amazing and why everything else after that spiraled into a pit of mediocre madness. Well, if you think about it for more than a second, the answer to this question becomes extremely painfully obvious. In fact, the real reason as to why every single Junji Ito adaptation, including Uzumaki, suck as much as they do is so obvious that you have been staring at it this entire time. Junji Ito is a man who has dedicated his life to horror and the pursuit of creating imagery that evokes feelings of dread and unease in the minds of its readers. His art often depicting humans in ways that seem tangible yet too far-fetched to be real, often reducing its characters to a shallow, distorted figure that loosely resembles the idea of a person who might have lived not too long ago. The horrifying aspect of his stories is not some cheap jump scare that catches you off guard, but the bizarre, strange yet terrifying ideas which entrap you into this hopeless world he often creates in his stories, unsettling you to your very core. The terror of Junji Ito's works lies in the anticipation created by every page, every panel, every deliberate pen stroke that is meticulously and meaningfully drawn and placed over the course of multiple hours on end. That level of detailed artwork born out of pure dedication and hard work is something that is difficult for any standard anime to ever even hope to pull off, which is the reason Ufotable tried to tackle the problem using CGI, whereas Studio Dean simply gave up before they even got started. The only way that these pages created by a person as talented as Junji Ito could possibly be replicated and transformed into an anime that did not suck was if there was a director out there equally as experienced and focused at their craft, someone who had immense creativity, whose approach was nuanced, and who had an eye for bringing the absurd and otherworldly to life. which are all words that can be used to describe Hiroshi Nagahama as a director. And to show you what I mean, I want you to think back to his directorial work on Flowers of Evil. Sure, the anime did not look the best or even good a lot of the times. Some scenes were way too silly or overly animated for anyone to take them seriously, and it was clearly not a comfortable anime to sit through 12 entire episodes of. But the Flowers of Evil manga is also not a pleasant experience to sit through. The story of Flowers of Evil is about guilt, about regret, about putting on a facade to protect any semblance of normalcy in one's life, and about how the mistakes we make in our youth can shape up or destroy the image of who we think we are as a person. The author of Flowers of Evil wanted to express the struggles of puberty through this manga, and he did so in the most fucking raw way possible, by putting the confusion, perversion, and pretentiousness of its many characters on full display for all their ugliness, then slowly destroying all of their personas to reveal the true hidden darkness that resides in each and every single one of them. And you can see those themes being explored in the very essence of this adaptation. The visuals, though as stupid as they may look from time to time, were able to perfectly imitate both the ugliness and the beauty of the real world these teenagers are struggling to navigate through, which is something that wouldn't have been possible for the normal style of animation to achieve as successfully as rotoscoping was able to. Then there's the unfiltered chaos of the OST, the ending song, and the cinematography at display, all of which work together to represent and emphasize the inner turmoil and darkness of its characters to the most extreme yet effective degree. And I get that I sound really pretentious when I say all of this, but I really do think there was a reason behind every single decision made in this adaptation, all for the sake of making something that wouldn't just be cool or quirky, but be memorable and hard-hitting for the people who were willing to give the show a chance. Which is exactly what happened over the course of the next decade, as many people recognized the actual potential behind the true intent of this adaptation. And to further prove my point, it turns out that the choice to make the anime have realistic visuals was discussed between the director and the author, who was actually supportive of this idea and said that Nagahama as a director had a great understanding of the nuances of his manga. With all that being said, the anime still had its fair share of flaws. We're not gonna act like it was a perfect avant-garde show that was misunderstood by the masses. It was by all accounts a commercial failure that never got renewed for a second season. But that doesn't really matter, because whether you dislike or love what you're currently watching on your screen, you cannot deny the fact that Hiroshi Nagahama was a director who understood the qualities that made the original work so great. He was then able to replicate that into a different medium by not being afraid to go down the less traveled route to achieve his directorial vision, and he seems to genuinely have fun in that process. And that to me sounds like the perfect kind of creative person to adapt the works of an author like Junji Ito, which makes it all the more unfortunate that he was forced out of the project after having created just one great episode. The point I'm trying to make here is not to make someone seem like a hero or to portray someone else as a villain in this entire production mess. I just honestly think it's a shame that Nagahama couldn't put his creative vision to use on the entire Uzumaki adaptation, and the people who waited over half a decade for this anime definitely deserved a much better end product themselves. But however brief that period might have been, Nagahama along with his staff members had done the impossible. Through sheer effort and dedication, they had forced into existence something that should not have existed. For a total of 22 minutes, they had adapted the pages of Uzumaki into something truly special. And if you're a fan of Junji Ito's works, I think that's something worth celebrating.